It's time for the Brouhaha Sports Show. Brouhaha Sports with award-winning sports writer Dale McKee and co-host Marshall Wood. Talking sports with the legends of the game and famous sports personalities. Brouhaha. Now to Marshall and Dale with tonight's guest.
Welcome to the Brouhaha, everybody. Marshall Wood and Dale McKee. Hope you're having a great day, everyone out there in Brouhaha land. How about you, Mr. McKee? Are you having a great day?
I am. I like the weather this time of year, don't you?
Weather?
Yeah,
I do.
I like it.
The time deal is a little...
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, a lot of big stuff going on in the football world. Big win for the Rebels this week, huh?
They win.
I think they
did.
did.
That is great. I'm proud for them. Were they 8-1 now?
I think so. They may be looking at they got a good shot at their second 10-win regular season in history this year.
Yeah. Of course, you always get information up there. I don't know how much it's accurate, but they're talking about them being in the Peach Bowl against Penn State if they go 10-2.
Yeah.
I think that'd be a good game.
That'd be awesome.
That'd be an offense against a defense.
Yeah.
Penn State's got a good defense. They have no offense, which Ole Miss would be really glad about.
But go real good with their defense.
The Rebels have found a way to win in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. There was just something they haven't been able to do like forever.
Yeah.
I'm talking about teams like they're playing.
That's what hurt them last year.
Yeah. They were 7-0 last year, weren't they? And then fell apart.
Yeah, Alabama, I think they lost 5 in a row.
Yeah.
But they've beaten Kiffin has beat Jimbo 2 points 3 years ago, 3 points last year, and 3 points this year. That must be gone, old Jimbo.
Kevin, tell about what a good roster he's got and everything.
Hey, best paid roster in football.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Tell us bring us Southern Mississippi got a win.
Yeah, I actually got to witness most of that ball game Saturday. Now, they jumped off to a great start, 17-0, but they just kind of played. But Will Hawker scored again there toward the end of the game. He didn't.
Yeah.
He didn't want to embarrass. And I think Bowden said something after the game that he really appreciated Will Hall for not, scoring there. Yeah. And so that was good. I was very proud of Southern. But they got a big one this week, Thursday night. They go to Louisiana Lafayette, and of course now they've dropped a couple games here lately. Arkansas State beat them this week, pretty good. So
that's a 6:30 kickoff you got in your article here.
Yeah, 6:30 on ESPNU.
ESPNU.
The nation can see us again.
See us again. See us again.
After that Mobile travesty, maybe we'll do a little bit better this time. And Frank Gore has really come on last 2 or 3 games for the Eagles.
Well, I see where you had him with 130-something yards, 131 yards and a couple of passes for 36 yards, so he did really good. He's been quiet as the whole deal over there has been. Mississippi State struggling a little bit.
Well, we're going to get to talk to more about it. We're going to have one of the USM beat writers from the Clarion Ledger in here.
MSU beat writer?
Yeah, MSU.
Okay.
And I said Mississippi State, right?
You said USM, but I'm not hating. Okay. I just wanted to make sure.
Well, it's Mississippi State. Beat.
What are you, man, crazy or what?
Well, like if my fans don't know what a beat writer is, it's somebody that covers football, basketball, and baseball for a newspaper. That's kind of their thing. Now they do expand like maybe on Friday nights, but their main purpose is to keep up, go to the press conferences at State, and Ole Miss or everywhere they beat writer. I think everybody's got one. I think Southern may have one now through the Hattiesburg American. But
Wayne County have a beat writer?
Paul King.
Paul King.
Yeah.
Okay.
Football, basketball.
There you go. That's how it works.
That's how it works.
All right. Okay. Now, tell us about our guests. You mentioned them a little bit.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't know that much about Stefan. Stefan. It's Stefan, people. And
what's his last name?
I don't know.
Okay.
But it's
Krajisnik.
Oh, is it?
That's what I think it is.
Say it again.
Krajisnik.
Did y'all hear that?
How you like that? Stefan Krajisnik.
I'm not sure exactly where he's from, but he's got a lot of Indiana connections. He liked, wrote for the Indianapolis Star. I think he went to Indiana, might have covered Indiana University. So, anyways, but it's every dream of a football sports writer now. Let's go SEC.
SEC, baby.
SEC.
Why not?
That's where the action.
That's where I want to be. I don't know.
But he's going to tell us about Mississippi State, and they just couldn't get the offense going. But I saw something today. Will Rogers says that he's going to be back for the Ole Miss game.
Come on, Will.
That's what he says.
All righty then.
So
we'll see if Arnett lets him throw it or not.
I got you.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's do. Let's take a break to hear from our sponsor, and then Dale and I will be back tonight. We'll be back in a moment with tonight's guest, and I'm taking a shot at this, but we're going to see how he says it. Stefan Krajisnik, right after this break.
Phillips Building Supply in Laurel, your hometown building supply store since 1954. We are locally owned and pride ourselves on helping our customers find exactly what they need. From foundations to roofs to doors and windows, Phillips has it. For tools, hardware, lumber, and plywood, visit Phillips Building Supply.
Welcome to the show, Stefan. Stefan, we're honored to have you here today. We know you're the beat writer for Mississippi State for the Clarion Ledger. Tell us how you got to Mississippi.
Yeah, well, it's definitely an interesting path. I started up in Indiana, where I went to Indiana University and had internships and things of that nature there. And in 2021, after I graduated, I had the opportunity to work for the Daily Journal in Tupelo, covering Mississippi State, before I switched over to staying in that same role for the Clarion Ledger. It's been a great time covering the Bulldogs, get to know everything about Starkville and about Mississippi. And looking forward to a fun weekend here with Mississippi State going up against Texas A&M.
Let's just start with football. Has the football? It seemed like when we came out with the predictions in July and August that Mississippi State was considered a real dark horse because of their offense, and everybody knows they always have a pretty good defense. What has kind of got sideways is Will Rogers' injury made that much a difference with the offense?
I think the injury is definitely a big part, right? You lose a senior starting quarterback, it's going to play a big part. But even then, the reason you went out and got a guy like Mike Wright, out of the transfer portal is he's an experienced guy who's played in the SEC. Yeah, originally you thought he was going to be more of a package piece, but he's a guy that you should be able to rely upon, at least when you're going up against teams like Kentucky. I mean, he beat Kentucky last year at Vanderbilt, right? That's a guy that should be able to step in and provide those type of opportunities, at Mississippi State, and that just hasn't been the case. And like you said, going into the season, there was questions about the Mississippi State offense and what it would look like, and there's been highs and lows. But the one thing you thought you could trust would be the defense, and that hasn't been the case this year, right? That's been a unit that's struggled too for Zach Arnett and defensive coordinator Matt Brock. So you kind of look up and down this roster, and you see, so many holes in places that this team has struggled this year, and you kind of look back on why this team was projected to finish last in the SEC, and that's a big reason why, right? There was a lot of questions, and there really haven't been a lot of answers as this season has gone on, and now you're in a tough spot where you're going into this weekend, you're 4-5, and you're about, an 18, 19-point underdog at Texas A&M. So it's definitely not been, the season a lot of people in Starkville expected, and definitely going to be, a long, tough offseason for, Mississippi State, the administration, and this coaching staff.
Well, you hear a lot of chatter. Now, I'm just talking about on social media and things like this, and it's not always reliable. But fans seem to be really restless about Arnett and his status to see if really. But to be fair to him, all these players were basically recruited on offense by Leach to run Leach's offense. So do they really have the capability in, say, next year or year after? Does Arnett have will he sell that offense? I mean, what are they going to need to fix this problem before next year?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of things that need to be fixed. There's no doubt about that. And, I think a big thing, there was so much talk this offseason of, what direction would they go in, in hiring an offensive coordinator? Would they kind of stick with something that looks like the air raid? Would they go away from it? There was a lot of questions of what they want to do. At the end of the day, you had Zach Arnett getting his first chance to be a head coach and doing that at the SEC level. He felt that the best way to move forward was making it his staff and doing things his way. And he kind of went about it like that and got a new staff in. And, whether it be the talent in place or the schemes that they're running, it's obviously not working in sync, right? There's something wrong between the players and what's being asked from the coaches, and things aren't working as expected. Now the question you look at is, like you said, okay, if this is a first-year head coach and you want to start bringing in players that fit your scheme, that's, most coaches get that opportunity. The problem is, number one, Arnett hasn't shown, he doesn't have a previous head coaching stop where he can say, hey, here's what I did over the course of time when I got my players. And so you kind of don't have that, track record to give you confidence, right away that he can do that. And number two, you're looking at a recruiting class that ranks at the bottom of the SEC, right? I mean, it's a class that does not have the elite talent. It's a class that is not going to stack up well against other SEC recruiting classes. Sure, they can go out and get some big transfers, but, even today they lose one of their top commitments in a 4-star wide receiver, Braylon Burnside here from Starkville, right? So they're losing top players from their backyard right now. There's definitely not a lot of confidence moving forward that even if Arnett and the staff are back, do they have the talent to kind of prove what you were alluding to there of finding players that fit that scheme? It's going to be a tough turnaround, and a lot of it is based on recruiting and the transfer portal, what they can do in this next 2 months or so. But for right now, they're in a tough spot when you look at the rankings and things of that nature.
Well, let's go away from Starkville for a little bit, because these next three games are probably going to only be favored in one of the three. But to you, the teams that Mississippi State has played this year on their schedule, which one impressed you the most, or a player that impressed you the most from the other
player
teams?
That was. Go ahead. What was that?
The players from the other teams.
Yeah. I think the team that's definitely impressed me the most right now is obviously Alabama on Mississippi State's schedule. I mean, there were so many questions at quarterback coming into this year, and you're kind of at the point now where everything's starting to click. Jalen Milrose, starting to build some momentum, and he's got players around him to make him good. I mean, that Alabama team, all the questions that they had, not just in the preseason, but frankly in those first 3 or 4 games where they didn't look that great, they're providing a lot of answers right now. They're looking like a team that, if they win out and play, against Georgia in the SEC title game, could make a case for making, the college football playoff again. So I think they've got the best roster and the best players that Mississippi State's gone against. You look at their schedule. I mean, LSU obviously always talented. South Carolina, it's been a tough year for them, but they've got talented players. Arizona, when Mississippi State picked up that win, I mean, Arizona's offense was struggling, and they made a change at offensive coordinator, but you can't deny how good KJ Jefferson can be when he's playing at his best. But, the team that's maybe surprised me the most among Mississippi State's opponents has been Arizona, right? I mean, they're in the rankings this week. Week 2, Mississippi State beat them in overtime, and that's a game where Arizona, I think, turned it over either 4 or 5 times. I mean, if they had played a bit cleaner in the first half, maybe they would have, upset Mississippi State here in Starkville. So Alabama's definitely been the best team that they've faced. I think there's no question about that. But I think the most surprising has definitely been Arizona, and you're kind of looking at that now and saying, man, if they were playing again today, Arizona would probably be favored by a touchdown or so. So it's kind of funny how, the season has panned out and how you kind of look back on that game a month or 2 removed from it. But that's kind of how I would assess the teams that they played against so far.
Yeah, it seems like in the SEC especially, as much as we've kept with it over the years, September is 1 month, and October you should be playing better than you do in September, and November you should be playing better. But a lot of it has to do with your schedule. Okay, so we're going to leave the SEC for just a minute. And you got a little Big Ten experience there with Indiana. What you think it's happening in the Big Ten, especially with Michigan? You got any thoughts on that?
I have a lot of thoughts on that. I think it starts. There's 2 parts to it, right? Number one is what they're doing is not like stealing signs is allowed, right? You can sit on the other sideline. If it's like let's say this weekend Mississippi State's playing against A&M. If Mississippi State notices that a certain sign is always going to be a certain scheme or a certain play, they're going to use that to their advantage. Stealing signs is allowed, and teams do it all the time. There's no doubt. Now, Michigan, using their resources to pay for a coach to travel and scout teams and steal signs ahead of time. Now, that's where you kind of get into the issues of it. And, I think there's debate back and forth on, if Michigan has the resources, why wouldn't they be allowed to do that? If this is the NFL, teams will be able to get away with it. think at the end of the day, college football, there's a big gap between the Michigans and the Georgias and the Alabamas compared to, a Central Michigan or even a Mississippi State, right? Some schools don't have the resources to go out and do that kind of stuff of stealing signs. So you put those rules in place to level the playing field a bit. And Michigan broke those rules and is probably going to face, some kind of repercussions for it. I mean, Connor Stalions has already been, he resigned / fired, whatever happened there. I'm sure there's going to be, other repercussions and punishments, put down on Michigan. Will they be punished this year? Will they be punished in the future? What exactly is the punishment going to be? I think there's, some questions to that. But I will say this, though. Growing up in Indiana, northern part of Indiana, I'm a Bears fan. So if Jim Harbaugh decides that he wants to step away from coaching Michigan and he's done dealing with, some of the stuff that he has to deal with in the college game, if he wants to come coach the Bears, I will forget everything that he has done in college, and he will have my support.
Well, I think he's a pretty good football coach now, but I'm like you. When is this thing going to be decided? But now the Big Ten, I'm sure they're looking at it from this start. Do we really want to kick Michigan out of this top 4? Because they're going to bring in a lot of money to the conference, especially if them and Ohio State are in the top 4. That's going to be a lot of extra revenues for all of the Big Ten schools. And so that's what and Michigan, I don't think they want Harbaugh to go, because if you look at the 2 or 3 coaches before he got there, they were wanting to run them off after a year or two, So that's just my general feelings. Do you agree or disagree with Michigan stands that, hey, we're going to stand by our coach, and the Big Ten, hey, we might lose some money, guys, if we do something bad to them?
Yeah, it's interesting because you've had a lot of Big Ten coaches speak out, upset about this, and obviously wanting there to be some punishment put down on Michigan. But at the same time, like you said, I 100% agree. The conference is, there's going to be punishments coming, I'm sure, but the conference doesn't want that to be this year. They don't want Michigan to be, left out of the playoff because of this. Because, like you said, there's a ton of money with that. And on top of which, as you alluded to, if Ohio State's only loss is against Michigan, there's going to be a case for Ohio State and Michigan to both make the playoff. And that's a ton of money to be had. And so there's definitely going to be decisions to be made. And there's a lot of financial, motivation behind what happens, and there's a lot of, money talks, right? And money carries a lot of weight, and that's going to definitely play a role into how, this situation is handled. Just because everything you said is correct. If you're the Big Ten, you have this opportunity to get 2 teams in the college football playoff. You want that, and how this Michigan case is handled is going to play a big part in that.
What do you think about the West Coast teams coming into the conference next year, into the Big Ten?
Well, I think for those who are arguing that they want the Pac-12 to stay put and stay as it was, this year has definitely been a great case for them, right? I mean, look how awesome some of those teams have been, not just in terms of how good they are. I think you've got, maybe 5, 6, 7 teams ranked right now out of the Pac-12. But I think what's most important is not only are those teams ranked, but they're fun to watch, man. You look at Washington, USC, Oregon, the style of play, the high-flying offense. I mean, that game between Oregon and Washington a few weeks ago was, appointment television. That was a great game to watch. It was a fun game, a high-scoring game. Washington USC was a similar case, a little bit less defense, but still, a fun game to watch. It is tough to think that, this is the last year of the Pac-12 just because of how good it is this year and how, exciting these next few weeks are going to be in that conference. But it'll definitely be an interesting contrast, watching a Washington or a USC go to the Big Ten and play against an Iowa or a Wisconsin, right? I mean, if you watch that Iowa Northwestern game the other day, and then you tune in to watch Washington USC, it's kind of hard to convince me that that's the same sport. It looks so different and it's played so differently, right? Mm-hmm. And that's going to be an interesting dynamic of how are these teams going to integrate into the Big Ten? I think at this point, you're looking at USC and Washington and Oregon and saying, well, they're going to be a lot better than a lot of those Big Ten teams that they're joining outside of, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. But is that going to change maybe how Big Ten teams approach it? Big Ten has that, Midwest blue-collar mentality of being, these defensive programs and having these low-scoring games. Well, if Washington's coming into the conference and putting up 40, 50 points on everyone, the conference has to adjust, right? And are you going to see teams like Iowa or Wisconsin start looking for, big-time, high-flying, offensive coaches? Is it going to change the way these conferences kind of look for coaches? It's going to be interesting to see the dynamic. Or the flip side, are Washington and USC going to be forced into, having to focus more on defense and getting, big-time defensive coordinators? There's going to be a lot. Something's got to give, right? You can't have a conference where, two teams are just playing a completely different brand of football and dominating, because as good as Ohio State and Michigan are, those are teams that are built on really good defenses, right? USC and Washington aren't like that. So something's got to give. Which style of play is going to be the most successful? Because if Washington comes in there and they're getting shut out by a defense like Ohio State, regardless of how good their offense is, they're going to realize that they need to put up a defense that can play with that. Or is Ohio State going to do that, on the opposite way and really kind of focus on getting that high-flying offense? It's an interesting dynamic just because the style of play is so different between those two conferences of how it's going to look when they mesh together.
Man, that's huge. That really is big. I wanted to ask you something, and I may be out of line. I could have dreamed this. But there's going to be two schools left out there in the Pac-12, Oregon State and Washington State. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Did I read where they're going to try to move forward in some form or fashion with that conference with two folks in it? Did I read that, or do you know anything about that?
Oh, I think you probably read a million things on it, because I don't think there's a solution yet. I think I read a million things on it as well, and I think there was definitely a part of Oregon State and Washington State that wants to stay out there and maybe have teams like let's say San Diego State or something like that join the Pac-12 and maybe kind of remodel what the Pac-12 looks like and get some new teams in there. Or are they going to be left with no choice of having to go join a Big 12 or an ACC or Big 10? That's definitely the biggest decisions, looming, because, Oregon State's ranked. Washington State was ranked earlier this year. They're not bad football programs being left in the dust. Those are good football programs that, if they can find a spot, they can still have some success. It's just a matter of, are you going to stay put and add teams to a new looking, Pac-12, or are they going to leave? It's going to be interesting. I don't know what it looks like for next season. For the immediate future, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. So, as much as realignment kind of seems to be quieting down, and maybe some teams are finding places, as far as it comes to the remaining Pac-12 teams and kind of other teams that could potentially join them, there's going to be a lot more coming forward, I think.
Do you have a Heisman Trophy vote?
I did last year. I haven't been asked yet this year, but I would imagine I'll be back again this year.
Well, who would you? Who would be some of your people you're considering?
Well, I think Michael Penix and maybe my Indiana ties are showing a bit there, but I think Michael Penix is the guy right now over at Washington. He's been the best quarterback in the country. Has impressive numbers. His team is undefeated. That team without him would not be nearly as good. He would be my guy who gets the vote right now. And I'll say this too. I know LSU hasn't had the season that they've wanted, but it's hard to argue that it's hard to argue that Jaden Daniels isn't the best player in college football right now if it's not Michael Penix. He's a guy that definitely, deserves some votes. McCarthy up in Michigan, I don't know if he's been as good as some of the other quarterbacks, but, you can't deny how good that Michigan team has been and the big role that he plays in that. Talking about non-quarterbacks, though, I think Marvin Harrison, the wide receiver at Ohio State, the better he plays and the better Ohio State looks, he continues to make a case to, kind of at least be a finalist and to at least be in that conversation. So I would say Michael Penix right now. I'd say Jaden Daniels probably second, and then kind of a race for third, where a guy like Marvin Harrison might be able to make himself in that conversation.
Are you an AP top 25 voter?
I am, yes.
Okay, so who is number one, Georgia or Ohio State?
I still think it's Georgia. I have a lot of questions still about Ohio State and exactly kind of what their offense can do, moving forward. And I'm sure, because their offense didn't look great against Penn State and against some of the teams they've been tested against. It wasn't that great against Notre Dame. We'll see what they look like against Michigan. But there's no denying that Ohio State defense is a real deal. But I still think Georgia's the top team. You look at the talent that they have, and Brock Bowers being injured right now. If they can get him back, to me, Georgia's the number one team. But Ohio State and Michigan are right there at 2-3. I think Washington has questions on defense, which concerns me a bit, and Florida State they got off to a hot start. And now you're looking at it saying, well, maybe those wins against Clemson and Clemson and LSU aren't as good as we thought they were when they happened. So I would say Georgia, Ohio State, and Michigan battling there for number 2, and then it kind of opens up after that.
Is Ole Miss ranked where they need to be at number 10, or should they be up or down?
I had them at number 9. I think they're better than Penn State right now, but I think that's a pretty good place to put them. I mean, you look at the teams that are in front of them. If it's Texas, Alabama, Oregon, Washington, Florida State, Ohio State, Michigan, and Georgia. There's no shame in being behind those teams, right? I think the real debate is kind of between whether you think Penn State or Ole Miss is the better, one-loss team. I think right now it's Ole Miss, and I have them at number 9. And they're number 10 overall. So, this game coming up for them in Georgia should be a fun game. I think if I read correctly, this is the smallest spread for a Georgia team being favored at home in quite some time. So I think that goes to show, what Lane Kiffin has done with that offense and what Pete Golding has done with that defense, and the chance that they have this weekend against what I think is the number 1 team in the country.
That's just rat poison. I've heard that before somewhere. Listen, one final question, and just give us just a brief answer. Is Jimbo Fisher in trouble at A&M?
Well, I think he's in trouble, and I think the question really is if Texas A&M wants to pay that buyout, right? I think right now it seems like the only thing keeping them from making a move is that buyout. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do if they can get the money together. I mean, I don't doubt that they can get the money together, but it's, do you really want to spend $70 million just to get rid of a coach? It's a decision, that athletic department has to make. I think he's definitely on the hot seat, though. He's not producing the results that he's paid to produce. I do think to some extent, the expectations placed on him were kind of unrealistic. Is A&M really a team that should be competing for a national title every year? Probably not. I mean, they have the talent, but, they haven't won like Georgia and Alabama have in the past. To just say that they should be in that conversation. However, they're paying Jimbo like a coach that should be in that conversation. I think that's the biggest thing right now is he's not living up to his contract, and A&M has to make a decision moving forward. And I think inevitably, whether it be this year or next, they're going to have to move away from him.
Stefan, it's about time for wrap up the show, and Marshall's going to get with you here in a second, and we do appreciate you being on the show.
Again,
Thanks so much, Trey.
We'll just reiterate that too, Stefan. We thank you. I'm going to ask you to hold on for just a minute. We're going to take a break to hear from one of our sponsors, and Dale and I will be back with tonight's final segment right after this commercial.
Phillips Building Supply in Laurel, your hometown building supply store since 1954. We are locally owned and pride ourselves on helping our customers find exactly what they need. From foundations to roofs to doors and windows, Phillips has it. For tools, hardware, lumber, and plywood, visit Phillips Building Supply.
Welcome back, everybody, to the final segment. I tell you what, we had a good time with that guy, Dale. You know how to, you just keep pulling good rabbits out of your hat.
Well, I just was surveying the country to see who was. I said, this guy from Indiana, he knows about Mississippi State.
Well, you like when you get a guy that's at Mississippi State from Indiana. Just like you showed in the interview, man. You can just talk all over the country. Yeah. We've been all over the country.
Yeah. Well, he had a little Big Ten background, and last week Michael Kotz, Ole Miss guy, he talked to us about the West Coast and all the teams out there, but the one thing they both agreed on, even though one writes for Ole Miss and one writes for Ole Miss, but a beat writer for Ole Miss would say they like the quarterback from Washington.
They sure do.
So.
A lot of big games this past week. What's the biggest one you thought?
The past week?
This past week.
Well, I thought Ole Miss and Mississippi State and Southern Miss were probably in must-win situations. And I think Ole Miss rose to the challenge. I think Southern rose to the challenge. But Mississippi State's still got to work on that offense, Coach.
Yeah.
And maybe Will Rogers, I think we talked about it earlier. I heard he was going to try to come back for the Ole Miss game. So we shall see. That will make a difference, I promise you.
Arkansas had a big win over Florida. Sam Pittman probably thinks so. You know why? It increased his buyout by $5 million, that win. So Arkansas had a big win. Sam Pittman did anyway.
Well, I sometimes I go up on YouTube and just listen to interviews where it's a Saban or Kirby Smart or Lane Kiffin or whoever who it is. But when he had to let that offensive coordinator go a couple weeks ago, I was listening to that one. And the man had so much compassion for that man.
Yeah.
He said, man, he's a good coach, but it's just not working out.
Yeah.
But he's a
Hated
good coach.
it. Yeah.
Hated it.
Yeah.
And
Good person.
just listening to Sam Pittman, I said, I hope you win.
Yeah, well, he got him another $5 million if they want to get rid of him. Here's another thing I thought kind of found interesting. I was talking to my boy about this a little earlier in the day, and we were talking about the Cowboys. You know, people love the Cowboys. People love to hate the Cowboys.
Yeah.
They're 5-3. It's an interesting thing. Their average margin of victory and their average margin of loss is only 2 points difference. They play it pretty close to the vest. Their average margin of victory is 22, and the average margin of loss is 24. Don't see that every day.
No, you don't.
Here's something else that just happened. This has been the first time in 66 years where somebody scored at least 10 touchdown catches, at least 10 touchdown runs, and at least 10 touchdown passes in a year. Do you know who did that?
Excuse me now, one more time.
Something has happened
10 rushing
for the
touchdowns.
first time since 1966.
Is this NFL? Mm-hmm. NFL. 10 rushing touchdowns in a season. Mm-hmm. 10 passing touchdowns. Mm-hmm. Anything else?
And 10 catching, 10 receiving, 10 running, and 10 passing.
Ooh.
I guess it's in a season. Frank Gifford did it 66 years ago. He had 14 touchdown catches, 34 touchdown runs, and 43 touchdown passes.
He caught 43 touchdown passes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Taysom Hill just did it.
Saints
for the Saints. He's got 11, 26, and 10. First time in 66 years that's happened. That doesn't happen every day.
Have the Saints scored that much?
I don't know. Maybe this is a lifetime deal, but it's the first time it's happened anyway.
Well, the Saints had a big win yesterday, too.
They did.
Because, or Sunday, because of the fact that they go to Minnesota and then they get back into their Tampa Bay, Atlanta, Carolina deal.
Yeah.
So they needed a win, but I looked at the schedule of the last 8 games. If they win 5, they got 10 wins. They'll probably win that division at 10-7 since they're playing 17 games now. Mm-hmm. And so I think that'll be interesting.
All right.
To see how they do this weekend at Minnesota.
We got a lot of interesting things going on. We got that. Ted Mark's going to get us on that, whether it's your cell phone or the public line. But it's time for us to get ready to check out. I want to remind everybody that you can follow the Brouhaha on our Facebook page during the week at the Brouhaha, and also on YouTube, our YouTube channel, you guessed it, the Brouhaha, where all of our shows are cataloged, where you can go back and listen to them again. But it's come to the time in the show where it's time to say goodbye, Dale.
Goodbye, Dale.
Well, goodbye, and we'll see you next week for more of the Brouhaha. Get us out of here, Jamie.
You've been listening to the Brouhaha with Dale McKee and Marshall Wood. Heard Tuesday evening, 6 p.m. on WABO. For more of the Brouhaha, follow us during the week on Facebook and WABO.